What it do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fourth album by Rihanna. Basically, this project is called Rated R, and it came out in the fall of 2009. Now, to my knowledge, this is basically like the first explicit album from. Now, to my knowledge, this is like the first explicit album by Rihanna. She had kind of had like a bad girl vibe on the particular 2007/2008 album, Good Girl Gone Bad. But with this particular one, there's more explicit language on here. I mean, for a pop artist, it's really not that explicit, I would have to say, but for a pop musician, it kind of was at the time, I suppose, as far as it kind of happened. Rihanna was kind of more of like a more kind of relatively vanilla kind of pop artist, just with like the makeshift feel with songs that she had done on like her 2005, 6, and 7 albums. So I would have to say this is kind of an edgy one where there are some commercial and kind of makeshift songs on here, but I kind of feel like there's just a lot more edginess and kind of more hip hop type oriented type tunes as far as that kind of happens. Jeezy's on here. I want to say Slash is on here from a rock band, and there's just stuff like that that's kind of on here. There's some good stuff on here. I just like the overall kind of darker streak that this album particularly kind of has. And I would almost say, like, I want to say that I want to say that I gave, like, Good Girl Gone Bad a pretty high score back in March when I reviewed it. It's been a while since I listened to that particular album, but I did like that album quite a bit. It had some good bops on there, and it kind of blended it pretty well with, like, the makeshift type tunes. Songs like Hate That I Love You with Neo and some of those type ones. There just were some good makeshift kind of piano type ballads and MySpace type songs that had a good edge towards it. But this particular one kind of has less kind of makeshift type tunes, but it still does kind of have them. It's just kind of in a more oriented type sense. I just like the fact that Rihanna kind of had like a darker affair as far as this album kind of went. It was just an overall kind of edginess. Now, this album had 6 singles. That's definitely pretty good. It was definitely pretty widespread. It had a #1 on here in the form of Rude Boy. And this is kind of an album where Rihanna started to cross over into like more of like a mainstream kind of diva territory as far as being a lot more ubiquitous and just kind of more like larger than life as far as that kind of happened. Now, I think with her 2005, 2006 album, she was just kind of like, pretty strong musician in terms of that, but it was really her 2007 album, this one, that kind of started to transform in a sense. And then every subsequent one after this at least had some pretty widespread hits on there, like her Talk That Talk album and her Loud album and Unapologetic albums all really reached her to like a pretty supreme kind of place as far as that kind of went. But this is kind of one where she probably put in a lot of work on this particular album and it paid off. I would definitely say it paid off just to be able to say that this is kind of one where this is definitely I feel like Rated R is definitely an album that kind of beefed up Rihanna's catalog in terms of like the hit potential and just got her to like a pretty widespread category as far as like being like in kind of like an untouchable kind of territory as far as that kind of went. Just more of like a sheer kind of queen territory and so many folks that like Eminem and Michael Jackson and Prince and some of those type folks and Queen and some of those type folks kind of reached around that time. Now, I think maybe you could think it was a little bit earlier from this particular album, but I definitely think with these subsequent albums between this one and Loud and some of those other ones, I mean, Rihanna's definitely in a pretty widespread just overall territory, I'd have to say. So there's 6 singles on this particular album. And I definitely liked most of these, or I basically recommend all of these, I'd have to say. And there's just a lot of overall appeal about these. These are just some good ones. Even if every single one of these songs didn't hit #1, I feel like there's just enough appeal about these that kind of has like the territory. I feel like probably the songs from like Good Girl, I feel like maybe the singles from Good Girl Gone Bad from 2007 and the Reloaded album from 2008 may have had more widespread kind of appeal. Just songs like Umbrella and Disturbia and some of those type ones. But these are definitely a good batch of singles that just had a lot of electric kind of appeal and just overall more edginess towards it that just works pretty well. So the first single is Rush. The first single is Russian Roulette, and this is kind of like a twinkling evening thriller. I would have to say it's excitable for stepping out. I would have to say and it's just a leftover evening makeshift of a song. I would have to say so. This is just a good one to kind of have. This is kind of one that just kind of breezes and weaves into like some higher times as far as that kind of happens. I definitely feel like songs like Hard and Wait Your Turn are a little bit more electric as far as that kind of happens, and Rude Boy's a little bit more summery pet. But I just would have to say Russian Roulette's kind of one. Russian Roulette's just kind of a twinkling one for getting ready to step out and get ready to have some times as far as that kind of happens. This one that should give you some exhilarating type feels as far as that kind of happens. Just a very excitable type one. It's just good for like some, when I said leftover evening makeshift, this is a good one where if you do have some leftover kind of vibes for work sessions and that type of stuff, just 6:37, you're still at work, but you're getting ready to step out. This is a good one to kind of have in that sort of sense. Just a real nice one to kind of have in that pitch. Hard is another nice one. Definitely like this one. This has Jeezy on there, and that's pretty good. Definitely, definite dope time to kind of have that. But this is kind of an imperative, kind of glimmering evening venue flash of a song, I would have to say. Just a regular night of festive blaze, I would have to say, definitely. And it's just a good crunk tune. This is just a pretty good one. This one and Russian Roulette kind of are like a good pairing. I kind of feel like the most riveting song in terms of the singles is Wait Your Turn, but I definitely feel like Hard, I can definitely see Hard as far as being at like the night venue and just the dancing kind of simmering as far as that kind of happens. Just a good one to kind of have in like some festive times as far as just where just the drinks are kind of sloshing around and that type of stuff, just kind of having a riveting time. I mean, this is kind of before EDM had kind of happened. I kind of feel like this is kind of a decent dance club. The song Hard is kind of before widespread EDM appeal kind of started to happen, but I would have to say it's just a nice one to kind of have for having some drinks in your system and just kind of having the concept of just being kind of around a dance club and just kind of being in the ambience of the nightclub as far as that kind of happens, as far as that kind of goes. Just a nice one. But Wait Your Turn is probably one of the best songs on this album. Definitely like this one. It's just a real snaring kind of highlight. This is definitely like a snaring kind of bop-ish, kind of explosive highlight, I would have to say. Just a real nice one as far as that kind of goes. Just an easy kind of dance club energy, and it lasts all night, I would have to say. And it's just a very vivid song. So this is just an excellent one. Really like the electro kind of beat on here. Just has a great hook and melodies. Just an overall snappy kind of one. This is just a good highlight. Probably one of Rihanna's best songs, in my opinion. In my opinion, I would say this is one of Rihanna's best songs. It just continues to be a highlight. It just has a lot of bop-ish appeal, and she needed more songs like this. There's not really another single like this, but it's just an overall electro club hit that just hits pretty heavily. And it's just an overall pretty widespread one, I would have to say. But it didn't really chart that heavily, which is kind of a surprise. But it's too bad, but it's still a good highlight. It's still a good highlight, I would have to say. Rude Boy is the fourth single, and this is another nice one. Rude Boy is the fourth single, and this is another nice one. This is a song that hit #1. It's definitely a pretty widespread one. This has over 500 million plays on Spotify, so it's definitely a pretty good highlight. This is a summery, kind of dewy and balmy pep of a song, I would have to say. It's just a breezy kind of pop tune, and it's reminiscent of Umbrella, I would definitely say. And it's just a large, this song has some large commercial appeal. So this is one, if you do like the summery kind of balmy vibes of Umbrella and just kind of miss that kind of poppy pep that that song particularly kind of had, and you just want some commercial vibes as far as that kind of goes, this is kind of like almost like a reggaeton type tune, just kind of a more peppy type Jamaican type pop type tune, I would have to say, as far as that kind of goes. But it's just a real nice peppy one that just works great for spring and summer. Great song to hear in April or May, something like that, when the leaves are still, when the trees are still green and pink and some of those type things. As far as that kind of happens, it's a good tune for that. Definitely, Rude Boy's a pretty melodic one, so I definitely enjoyed that one. Rockstar. Rockstar 101 is the fifth single, and this is a good riffed kind of bad girl vibe, I would have to say. It's just an edgy highlight, and it's different for Rihanna, I would have to say, and it's just got some superb melodies. So this is a definite nice one. It's a pretty good highlight on here. Just really like the rock rap, just really like the rockish kind of pop type tune that it kind of has. A rock pop, if you can count that, something like that. I guess it would be pop rock. There is some tunes like that, but just to be able to say it's just kind of from a more R&B and kind of hip hop type oriented artist to kind of have some rock type tunes. This works pretty well. It's just a nice one to kind of have. Just real nice riffage on there. Just a good kind of bad girl type vibe as far as that kind of happens. I want to say that Slash is on this particular song. It's just a good vibe to kind of have on here. So it's just a good one. Definite highlight. And then the sixth single is Te Amo. This is another good highlight on here. This is a more Latin pop type tinge type one. It's definitely a good one for that sort of sense. And this is just a steady kind of makeshift pop tune, I would have to say. It's a good late day work a day. This is a good late day work a day commerce malaise of a song, I would have to say. And it's pretty similar to Hate That I Love You off of her 2007 album Good Girl Gone Bad. So it's just a good boppish kind of one. Pretty steadfast type one. Just a real kind of work a day type tune, just in a blue collar sense. Just really kind of through the motions, just day to day, down to earth type one that just kind of works in that sort of sense. A little bit more steadfast. It's definitely like the tone of that particular one. It's good that Rihanna kind of had some of these, but if you pay attention to like the six singles on here, this is really like the first single that kind of has vibes from like her 2000. If you pay attention to like the six singles on here, this is really like the first one that kind of brings it back to like Good Girl Gone Bad vibes minus Rude Boy, with the similarities to Umbrella, I'd have to say. So it's just a good concept. A lot of this is just in a lot more stepping out and kind of evening based kind of affairs. A lot of these are just in a lot more evening based and kind of stepping out type affairs, but I just would have to say there's just some good moments on here. A lot of good evening pep as far as that kind of goes. Definitely like the concept of it, but there is some kind of workaday type tunes. Rude Boy, there are some kind of workaday type tunes. Rude Boy and Te Amo are some good ones for that. But the other ones, the other four singles all have like a particular kind of edge. It just works pretty well for Rihanna. I just would have to say it's definitely kind of good to get Rihanna on this kind of edginess. This works pretty well. She has a pretty good bad girl streak on this particular album. I just like the highlight to seeing some of this. This works pretty damn well as far as that kind of goes. So yeah, I just would have to say, so yeah, there's 13 songs on this particular album, and out of those 13 songs, I wound up recommending to you 8 plus 2 Almost songs. So that's basically 10 pseudo kind of 10 songs. The 2 Almost songs would be Firebomb. The 2 Almost songs would be Firebomb and Stupid in Love, and the 8 songs I recommend would be Wait Your Turn. And the 8 songs I recommend would be Wait Your Turn, Russian Roulette, Hard, Rude Boy, Rockstar 101, Te Amo, Photographs, and Madhouse, the intro song. So to talk about some of these, basically the two Almost songs. Firebomb is kind of like a drizzling day kind of piano ballad, I would have to say. It's pretty similar to Stupid in Love, definitely. It's just a haphazard kind of makeshift like Riri from 2007, I would have to say. It's just pretty much makeshift Rihanna, I'd have to say. Just Firebomb has a real kind of just steadfast kind of day-to-day type feel, just in like a more standard kind of makeshift type fare as far as the workaday type feels that Rihanna kind of did on her 2007 album. So when I said, I mean, the thing about it is just in terms of the singles, it's kind of a little bit more, in terms of the singles, it's a little bit more edgy as far as that kind of happens. But in terms of some of these album cuts, there is some tunes that are kind of similar to her 2007 album, Good Girl Gone Bad, and some of that type of stuff. So it's just good. It's just good to kind of get that sort of format. Firebomb's just a nice highlight, but it's kind of an almost song just because I don't know how many times I would listen to it in a standard shuffle as far as that kind of happens. It's a makeshift song that it's a kind of makeshift song that's just really kind of steadfast makeshift that just doesn't have like a lot of edge towards it. So it's just kind of the concept where if you need those makeshift kind of tunes for just going to work and that type of stuff, but it just doesn't have much appeal apart from just like the steadfast kind of day to day of just like a standard blue collar job, something like that. And that's the same problem I had with Stupid in Love. Both of these are just really kind of straightforward, steady kind of makeshift type songs that just don't have a lot of edge to listen to and compellingness when you're not just in that kind of formatted kind of work session as far as that kind of happens. But basically, Stupid in Love is kind of like a rainy kind of power pop ballad, and it's just got a workaday. It's just kind of a workaday kind of commerce hit, I would have to say. It's a troubled and gloomy but kind of steadfast feel of this song. It's a troubled and gloomy but just kind of steadfast feel of this song particularly kind of has. I just would have to say it's a pretty good highlight to kind of get in that. A good highlight on here is Madhouse. This is kind of an intro song. It doesn't have like full blown melodies in song format, but it is a pretty nice one. This is like a snazzy, this is kind of like a snazzy kind of dubstep intro, I'd have to say. It's got a good bounce and it has somewhat basic melodies, but it's a pretty candid song, I would have to say. So it's just kind of a nice one. Definitely bleeds into Wait Your Turn real well. So these are two good intro type songs to kind of hear right off the bat. They just hit pretty heavily, but it's just kind of basic kind of melodies, but it's enough to kind of highlight and recommend. But it's just kind of one that's kind of snappy one. I would have almost, yeah, I would have liked more bite to the song, but Madhouse is a pretty basic song, but it hits well enough to still recommend. So it's a good highlight. So that's just kind of the thing. But to talk about some of these, a real good highlight on here is Photographs with Will I Am. This is definitely kind of a daunting kind of pop haze of a song, I'd have to say. It's some commercial fare, but it has a surprising glaze feel about it. And it's just kind of a moody like song like Disturbia, I'd have to say. So it's just a good highlight. I'm glad that Rihanna kind of came back to some of those moody kind of emo pop type tunes like Disturbia kind of was, something like that. It's just kind of like a steadfast type one that just has a real glaze type feel, just overall highlighted one that just works pretty well. Kind of one of the more kind of just haunting type ones on this particular album, but it just has such a highlighted feel that it's just really affable and ready to recommend. Just would have to say. And then another highlight on here would be, yeah, I guess that's it. I guess that takes care of the rest of the album. So talk about the songs, talk about the four songs I didn't recommend, which is basically just towards the back of the album. It's really only three. Talk about the three songs I didn't recommend, which is just Gangsta for Life, Cold Case Love, and the last song. Basically, these songs, like the last song and Cold Case Love, just had some bad compositions about them. Didn't really like the kind of steadfast, or I didn't really like the lambent and overall homely type feels of Cold Case Love and the last song. These were just kind of poorer ones that just kind of had like a more relaxed type feel and just kind of more ambient type feel that just didn't pull it off quite as well. And then Gangsta for Life was, and then G for L or Gangsta for Life just had like a poor electronic type beat that just didn't have like a good amount of jive as far as that kind of went. I feel like Wait Your Turn and Madhouse were just definitely better ones that just completely flattened this particular song. It was just a pretty poor one that just didn't really get things up as far as I was kind of particularly trying to happen. So that's just the G4L is just kind of a poor one. So to score this album, me recommending basically about 10 songs out of 13, 8.5 or 8 songs out of 13 plus 2 almost songs. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.5 out of 10. I just would have to say it's got a number of highlights on here. I definitely feel like this is one of Rihanna's best. Maybe just a hair or two shy of being her absolute best. I just would have to say I think I like Good Girl Gone Bad Reloaded a little bit more. That just had more bops on here and just a little bit more better snap as far as that kind of happens. So I do think the concept of this album getting to like the sixth single, having a number one on here, and just an overall lot of appeal as far as that kind of went is just some good vibes. Definitely had more edginess in terms of the singles, and it did have some makeshift type feels. This did some things right, but I just kind of feel like in terms of some of that, I don't know, it just felt like some of the electricity that was kind of on her 2007/2008 album just had a little bit more appeal. I just feel like those songs connected better. I mean, these songs are better. I feel like a lot of these, like Wait Your Turn is one of Rihanna's best songs. Definitely like the edgy kind of hard club vibes of Hard. Definitely like the kind of melodic feel of Rude Boy, and I definitely like the kind of makeshift pop type feel of Te Amo and some of those type ones. The kind of edginess of Rockstar 101 was just kind of the concept that It just kind of feels like the public reception of these songs in terms of their distinction is just not quite as high as Rihanna's previous albums. I just have to say that's kind of unfortunate, but I don't really believe that that should be the case. It's just kind of the concept. I just question how much these songs get airplay in terms of like her older times when you think of like some of her songs off of her 2005, 6, or 7 albums, like Umbrella or Disturbia, or some of the earlier tunes like that, or SOS, some of those type ones. I just kind of feel like that's kind of the concept about it. I mean, it's just not common that I hear songs like Hard or like Rockstar 101 or Russian Roulette or some of those type ones, even though some of these were kind of top 10 singles. That's kind of unfortunate. I mean, Rihanna has such a huge catalog that she has probably over 20, 30 hit singles that can be interchanged throughout radio airplay. It just doesn't feel like these kind of had the appeal of them. That's kind of the concept about it. But 8.5 out of 10 in terms of that. The social score as a result, I kind of think that that's kind of the territory. I'm going to go ahead and give the social score like a 9.25 out of 10 because I feel like there's enough appeal on this particular album. Only reason why I wouldn't get a 10 is just due to the fact that these songs just don't get quite as much airplay as Rihanna's earlier days, which is kind of unfortunate. But I just look after it. It's just kind of here and there between the attitude that folks kind of have in these times, just have to say. She does have 6 singles, so there's enough popularity about this particular project, and she just has a lot of appeal, a lot of edginess, a lot of good candidness, a lot of good melodies, stuff like that, as far as that kind of goes. There's some overall good songwriting, stuff like that. Just an overall excellent kind of album that I think there were probably a lot of people that just fell in love with Rihanna with songs like Disturbia and Umbrella. And I just wouldn't go with folks who maybe think that Rihanna's best dates are from like the mid late 2000s as far as that kind of happens. So that's just kind of the thing about it. But in terms of the future, like Rihanna's been kind of quiet since her Anti album from 2016. So I just would have to say, hopefully we get more Rihanna albums eventually as far as that kind of happens. This is a good type album, definitely one of her best. I feel like this one, between this one and Good Girl Gone Bad Reloaded, these are both some excellent kind of ones here. But I just would have to say, I'm gonna have to see some of her other ones. I know that she kind of topped these albums later. I definitely think some of her later albums are pretty good, but this is definitely a pretty good highlighted one here.